We've spent a good bit of time talking about insects as pests of plants, but insects are certainly not the only pests. We know that there are deer, mice, rabbits, things like that, and there's also snails and slugs, and that's what I want to spotlight a little bit now. We're going to talk about snails and slugs as basically the same thing. One has a shell, one doesn't, but for our purposes, let's talk about them all as one group. So snails are in the kingdom Animalia. They're in the phylum Mollusca. So do you remember what phylum our red wiggler worms, our composter worms, our earthworms? Do you remember what phylum they're in? If you said annelid, you're absolutely correct. So our snails and slugs are in a different phylum. They're in Mollusca. So what does Mollusca mean? Well, first of all, Mollusca means they're invertebrate. They do not have a vertebra. All right. And then secondly, they're not segmented. That doesn't mean they don't have parts of their body, but they are not segmented like our annelids. If you remember, what does annelid literally mean? I hope you said it literally means little rings. If you did, you're correct. Our mollusca are not going to be segmented like that. They're also in the class Gastropoda, so we're moving right on down. Now, why are these important to know about? They're a very strong chewing pest. They chew on our leaves, chew on our plants, and that way they harm their photosynthesis, they harm their transport of water and food, all that good stuff. They usually come out at night. So if you're going to find them on your plant, what do you need to do? You need to go buy a green light flashlight, come out, look around for them at night, or if you can look in the daytime, you can usually find them sort of in the ground at the base of your plant. So you can go out there in the daytime and dig around the base of your plant and see if you find them in the daytime too. All right. An interesting tidbit about snails and slugs, most of them are actually hermaphroditic, just like our worms, but a lot of these snails and slugs do not need a partner to reproduce. They can actually reproduce without a partner. So that's just a little trivia for you there. So let's talk about IPM for snails and slugs. What does IPM stand for? Integrated pest management. So in other words, we're not just going out and spraying some chemicals for snails and slugs. We're going to do some cultural practices. So one cultural practice, think about what might eat the snails and slugs. So one cultural practice would be chickens and ducks. So anytime you have a little farm or a little mini farm, that's one reason it's important to have different types of animals. Chickens and ducks are really good at eating snails and slugs, and they will get in your garden and they will pick around, they will eat lots and lots of pests. A little tidbit for you, chickens are really good also at eating ticks. Ducks not so much, just because their bill isn't the same way, but if you're just worried about snails and slugs, things like that, either bird will work. Earthworms. So another reason why our annelids are really, really good in the soil. They don't really bother our plants, but other than that, they'll munch through just about anything, including the little microscopic juvenile snails and slugs before they get older. The earthworms don't really care. They're just going to munch right on through them and eat them up. So earthworms are a good biological control. They're really good to keep in your soil, to aerate your soil, to make the black gold. So if you see earthworms in your soil, be happy that they're there. Physical barriers. So what would be a physical barrier to a slug or a snail? Diatomaceous earth. If you've never heard of diatomaceous earth, it's basically, it feels very powdery, but it's actually made up microscopically of very sharp shards of mineral. So it actually will kill your snails and slugs by 1,000 cuts. It'll just slice them to pieces. It'll slice their skin. So remember, snails and slugs are not in the same phylum, so they have differences than earthworms. Earthworms don't have the same type of skin, and the diatomaceous earth doesn't tend to bother your earthworms as much, but it will slice up your snails and your slugs. Diatomaceous earth is supposed to keep insects away. So one time I spread some out to keep the ants away and kill ants, and it worked for about 3 days. What actually happened was the ants just started building a little bridge across their dead comrades and went right across my diatomaceous earth. So it does work, but you do have to use it with some other cultural practices as well. Some people actually eat diatomaceous earth, a food grade diatomaceous earth. They say it keeps your digestive tract really healthy and kills any parasites in you. I'm not vouching for that. I've never eaten it. I don't know, but I actually did have a student try it, and they actually said it was good. They felt like it was good for them. So if that's something you want to look into, you can, but that falls into alternative type of things. So I'm not vouching for it, but just letting you know. You can look up diatomaceous earth and see what it says for yourself. Crushed eggshells. Crushed eggshells works the same way. So also crushed eggshells, if you put them around the base of your plant, as they start to decompose, what are they going to put into your soil? They're going to put some really good calcium into your soil, probably some phosphorus, but a lot of calcium. We know that calcium is really good for the pH of our soil, keeps our soil from getting too acidic, and it's a macronutrient of plants. So crushed eggshells, really, really good in your compost, really good for lots of different reasons. All right. Another IPM you can use is, oops, let me write this correctly, bait. So we can bait, and this would fall under like traps. So we're going to bait and trap. So what would be some bait we could use for slugs and snails? Grape juice is really good. They'll crawl in the grape juice and they'll drown. That attracts them. Another really good one, believe it or not, is beer. Like fill up a pie tin with beer or grape juice, and they'll crawl to that and leave your plants alone, and then they'll also drown. So that would fall under the trap. So we're going to bait and trap them. Couple other things you can do is you can hand pick them off. Of course, that's a lot of labor, but if you go out at night to look for them and you find them, go ahead and pick them off. That actually will make a big difference in a small garden. Good cultural practices, meaning cleanliness. Keep your compost pile away from your garden. So when you are doing your school garden design for your term project, think about that we really do want a compost pile, because compost breaks down into organic matter, which is an excellent amendment for the soil. It's good for the CEC, good for macro and micronutrients. But we don't want all the critters that break down that stuff to actually be in our garden. Snails and slugs can actually really help to break down your compost. So in that way, in a compost, it'll be good. But we don't want the snails and slugs crawling over to the good plants. So we're going to keep that at a good distance. Now, a lot of y'all are probably thinking salt. Why don't we just put out salt? Because I know some of y'all have been cruel, and some of y'all have poured salt on a slug. Will it kill them? Yes, it certainly will. It will certainly pull all it will certainly dehydrate them and kill them. But what else does salt kill? Salt also will kill our plants. So we're not going to put salt out in our garden unless we want to kill it. Salt is actually a good natural herbicide. If you've got weeds and you don't want the weeds there, put salt out, like in cracks of your sidewalk, and you don't want to spray and put toxic chemicals out. Put salt. Salt is actually used, people put it in horse arenas to keep grass from growing. You can, like for example, when we put out a big salt block, a 50-pound salt block for the horses, we have to put it where grass doesn't grow anyway, under trees where we've got, a lot of allelopathy or whatever, and in the middle of the trees. We have to put it where grass is not going to grow, because the salt will get in the soil and will not let the grass grow, like, ever. So anyway, you want to be really careful with salt, not to let salt get in your soil. Oh, I know what I want to tell you. Pyrethrins. Remember the last video I talked about marigolds, a spray that you can make with marigolds. And this is not about snails or slugs, sorry, but it's pyrethrins. Just in case you didn't look it up. Pyrethrins is what is made from marigolds that will kill and repel insects. All right, so that's it for snails and slugs. Recognize they are a pest, but in your compost they can help you, but in your garden they're going to hurt you. And now you know some good IPM to take care of snails and slugs. See you next time.